But Professor Sharma, you do realize that transgenic is but a tertiary stage of crop breeding. I mean, humans have carried out primary, secondary stages for 10,000 or more years. So, I mean, for example, let me give you an example of miracle rice, the IR varieties 8 or 64 have undergone thousands of mutations through breeding. This is genetic modification too. The maize cob, for example, has increased dramatically over thousands of years. The wild maize tough coating is now gone. Now, for example, if you take Professor Burlog, the Nobel laureate who got the Nobel Peace Prize for introducing the dwarf varieties. Now, he is responsible primarily for the dwarf varieties or rust resistance line. Now, had he done it through genetic modification of wheat, would you have opposed it?
I'm so glad that you asked this question, because I think the viewers also need to understand this very clearly. Yeah. I'm a plant breeder myself, and I have been engaged in plant breeding when I was as a student. Right. Now let me tell you, there's a difference between plant breeding and there's a difference between transgenic. This is what we need to understand. Plant breeding, as you rightly said, over the hundreds of years has evolved. There's no denying about it. What we do in plant breeding is we cross wheat with wheat. Yeah. We cross rice with rice. We cross barley with barley. But in case of transgenic, and I'm sure in nature, you have never got an example where you cross a donkey with a human being, or a human being with a rice plant.
But it's a gene. It's not the whole donkey.
We need to understand. We need to understand. Yeah. That is where the genetic engineering has actually broken that interspecies barrier. We need to understand that. And so what is happening now is that you can cross at the genetic level, at the molecular level, bring in genes from different kinds of alien species and insert in them. Now that is something different from the kind of breeding that was taken naturally. So let's not confuse these two things.
Of course.
So that chapter is separate. When you say Borlaug evolved those varieties, it took him number of years to cross those things, and then as a researcher, I can tell you, it takes number of years, at least 7 years for us to evolve a plant variety over the years.
The question was, had Borlaug, in today's day and age, and his views on genetic engineering are also very clear. He was not an opponent. But had he evolved the dwarf varieties using genetic engineering, would you have opposed
it? Yes, we would have definitely opposed it. Yes, there was reason to oppose that. Now, what Borlaug has done through the natural process, or what, as I said, is natural evolution that takes place. Nothing wrong in that. But when you try to bring in these kind of species at a molecular level, and then to try to evolve a new species or a new strain, whatever you call it, I think there are questions, a lot of questions attached with the kind of performance that it's going to get.
Right. So there's nothing wrong. The other issue with natural traditional breeding is that there is something called the linkage drag, which I'm sure you know, which is that when you're trying to mix the two DNAs together, there's a lot of unwanted DNA that also jumps around, and you have to subsequently make a lot of effort to remove the unwanted junk DNA.
We have been doing it. As a researcher, I have been doing it myself. So there's nothing, what the impression that has been given to us is as if we are trying to cut something. No, what happens is we have two plants, when we cross them, we eventually get a variety, let's say out of the thousands of plants that we grow, which would be suitable to what actually I want to really breed. So then we take time, let it settle down. We take time to say go on testing it again and again, so that it settles down in that manner that people can understand. And when it becomes a kind of a stable variety, then only it is released.
But in this particular, what you're saying is, let's, for example, if we're talking about agriculture, and surely in the next 10 to 15 years, through genetic engineering is going to actually revolutionize medicine, the way we look at medicine, personalized medicine. We would also be looking at, there's a new technology that's on the anvil called CRISPR technology, whereby you can actually do genetic engineering, it's gene therapy. What you're saying is as a blanket, you're opposed to genetic engineering of organisms.
See, in the case of medicine, let's be clear, those cancer patients who are suffering, for instance, they need a kind of a dose which can bring them back into life or whatever. There's nothing wrong in that, because you're only doing it at a level, micro level. But in this case of mass consumption, why should we tamper with food when there is no need for it, is my question. You say that these varieties will revolutionize or increase yield. There is not even one single genetically modified crop in the world which increases crop productivity.
So let me give you an example of, one of the first ones is the papaya. The papaya back in the 80s, you would know, and you've written extensively about it, suffered, it devastated the papaya crops in the 80s through this papaya ring spot virus. And the scientists produced a transgenic papaya where they took the ineffectual part of a gene of this virus and introduced it in the papaya, so that the papaya became immune to the virus. and it actually, it's basically like you would say, what they did was HSV, surface antigen vaccine. So what they took as part of this virus, and your body started making antibodies against the virus because the gene was expressing a protein of the virus. Now this has actually led to, I would say, a huge turnaround in papaya production and in profits, and the ring spot virus has almost been eliminated, and if I may call it, this is what is growth economics.
No, I don't agree with here. Let me tell you, when you look at the papaya case specifically, of course, this is a country where they have allowed all kinds of genetically modification to take place. But all I want to suggest is, if you look at a country like India, there are natural processes already available to take care of these diseases. Now, why we have to look at the profits? Economic growth only takes place when the profits of a company go up. So that is why we are more concerned about that. Why are you looking at the profits of a company to measure economic growth? Why can't you bring in a kind of a technology which is not dependent on some intrusion that we have made, which is already prevalent, which is already mechanism is available? Why don't you do that when the alternative systems is available, then to bring in the kind of a alien kind of a technology? That's the question that we are trying to raise. Now, in the case of BT cotton, the bigger problem is the bollworm insect.
Right.
Now, let's be very clear. I just want to take a few minutes of yours to explain to this.
Sure.
Now, this is a kind of a chakravyuh which has gone on over the decades. Now, when the cotton plant, let's say about 50 years or 60 years back, was affected by bollworm. At that time, there was no pink bollworm species as such. We started with the first generation chemicals. First generation chemicals like DDT and so on. Then when the insect became resistant to it, because there's a huge problem there in case of cotton, then we started with the second generation chemical. Then the insect became resistant to it after a couple of years. Then we started with the third generation chemical. I remember when the cypermethrines and these kinds of synthetic parathors were introduced in Punjab and Haryana way back in the 90s, I stood up and asked question, why are you bringing in the fourth generation chemicals to control these pests? The industry was happy, the scientists were happy, this was an easy way to take care of the problem, and look what happened then afterwards. The insect became resistant, first in Andhra Pradesh and then of course in various parts of the country. Now from that fourth generation thing, and hundreds of people committed suicide because of the insect resistance, damaging the crop and of course damaging the economy. Now, subsequently what happens is we have moved away from that kind of a chakravyuh into now the biological chakravyuh. Now we have the first generation of BT first, the insect becomes resistant to BT1. Now we brought in Bolgar 2, which is a 2 gene. So now the insect becomes resistant to Bolgar 2 after a few years. Now we're going to bring in Bolgar 3, then we'll introduce a scorpion gene in cotton to take care of this. Then we'll bring in a cobra gene. Is that the way science has to progress?
But Professor, let me not realize that in antibiotics, for example, you have penicillin.
Let me first answer this question. Sir, my submission here is that why can't we go in for that natural process of controlling the pest? Come to Jeend in Haryana. Jeend, there are 18 villages now where the women folk of those villages under the veil are trying to just walk around once in a week with a magnifying glass, trying to find out the kind of the threshold of insects. And can you believe for last 6-7 years, Jeend farmers have not used any pesticide on cotton, and yet there has been no attack of insects on cotton. Now, is that something wrong that we need to follow? Is that not an economic growth model? Why can't we follow that economic growth model, then be worrying about what the industry has to sell us? I think that's the point we are trying to make. Why do you want to pollute the environment? Why do you want to damage the human health also by spraying all those pesticides when there are simple sustainable technologies already available? Just because the industry doesn't gain by it doesn't mean we should not take it.
Right. So, but just to make it clear that you have the GM BT cotton, you don't have to spray the BT anymore, right?
It's in it's in it. Yeah. But the point I'm trying to make is BT is taking care of one particular insect.
But there are other insects in which you have number of
pesticides have to be sprayed. Otherwise, in any case, to control other pests. The point I'm trying to make is the pesticide use has gone up. In India also it has gone up. Globally it has gone up. So where is the gain? Where is the gain from BT technology? That it doesn't reduce the pesticide usage, it's only adding on to pesticide usage, there's no use. The point I'm trying to make is Jeend farmers can try to have a kind of a crop in which there are no pesticides required, even no biological pesticides required.
But haven't they shown, that PNA study I quoted, from 46% the pesticide use has come down to 11%.
This is very interesting. I would suggest you just go and Google, if you can, Google a Charles Benbrook study of America. He's also a scientist, and he will tell you how phenomenally the pesticide use has gone up. That's what I'm saying. All these scientific bodies also need to be questioned, including the Royal Society. Royal Society is no exception. And one of the Indians, I'm sure, is the chief now. I always question his science, because he comes to India and makes a science where we need genetically modified crops. I think he doesn't even know what GM crops are, because if there was
he's Professor Venki,
whosoever it is, the question is that if he knew that there's no GM crop in the world today which increases crop productivity, he wouldn't have said that. But he has been made to believe that there are answers, which I think he should come and visit Punjab, come and visit other areas to see the farmers have given answers. Now look at Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, now they are split. Andhra Pradesh, 36 lakh acres, no pesticide is sprayed, and there are 12-15 crops grown in that area. And the productivity has not gone down, productivity is going up. The farmers are a happy lot, 42% drop in pesticide usage, the environment has become cleaner, the food security is now being ensured. In fact, the Andhra Chief Minister has gone on record saying in the next 3 years he is going to make the entire farming class go non-chemical. Now that's the way forward. That's the way forward. But the industry will not support it. Simple reason, because the growth economics doesn't take place.
But so what you mean to say is that if you do not use any pesticides, you're not following the growth economics? Is that what you're saying?
See, let's be very clear. When I was a student of agriculture,
but if the productivity has gone up,
let me explain that. When I was a student of agriculture, there was a paper published by David Pimentel of the Cornell University. And David Pimentel had said, very distinguished scientist, he had said that 99% pesticides that you spray go into environment. Only less than 1% pesticide hits the target pest. Now, we knew it all along that only 1% pesticides are going to hit the target pest. Rest all are going into environment,
in fact,
which means damaging.
To quote, this is very interesting, you've quoted, I want to quote a study, which was a landmark study by Bruce Amis in 1992, again in PNA's paper. What he actually did extensively, studied extensively, and he found out that the dietary pesticides in American diet, American food, 99.99% are all natural pesticides. So it is a misnomer to say that synthetic pesticides are the ones that are polluting the American dietary foods.
No, see, what Bruce Amis said, I think, has been questioned a number of times. I'm not getting into that because I'm not an expert on that issue. But let me tell you what he says the other way. I'm saying when you spray pesticides, chemical pesticides, pesticides from outside, they were not required. When I quote David Pimentel, all I'm saying is David Pimentel had said that only less than 1% pesticides would hit the target pest, which means 99% pesticides were going into environment in any case. So when we try to tell the country that so much of pesticides are being used, we are not telling the country that so much is going into environment or going into human health or impacting human health. Now, if only 1% were hitting the target pest, shouldn't we have gone into a kind of a system where we didn't require pesticide? Now, what Andhra has shown today, or Telangana now, because they are split, Andhra has shown today is a model of agriculture which is called non-pesticide management. They don't use pesticide at all. Now, please tell me, who will have objection if no pesticides are used and yet the crops are bountiful? Will anybody have objection? Then why isn't that growth economics? Or growth economics is always related to that we must see the benefits or the advantages or the stocks market of these companies. I think that is what I'm trying to drive at or focus at, that is not growth economics. This is the real economics that we should be focusing on.
Right. Now, in your opposition to GM crops, you've teamed up with another scientist, I think filmmaker Mahesh Bhatt. You actually agreed with him when he said GM technology is bioterrorism. And now what he said is that in 1989, around 10,000 people were disabled after L-tryptophan, a genetically modified drug, was introduced in America. Most suffered memory loss, muscle weaknesses, leathery skin, and other symptoms. Studies attribute around 100 deaths to the epidemic. So in fact, what scientist Mahesh Bhatt was saying was actually wrong, because L-tryptophan is not a genetically modified drug. It's a naturally occurring amino acid. And there was a defective batch from a Japanese company which was exporting this L-tryptophan to America, and that is what caused the thing. So you see, Professor, what I'm trying to say, that there are two issues here. One is that in manufacturing defect has been interlinked with an opposition to GMO, where this is not GMO at all. Would you like to comment on, these issues that get
there are two things I
and
want to clarify here. Yeah. First of all, when we requested Mahesh Bhatt ji to do this documentary, I must tell you, we spent a lot of time to first convince him. And once he got convinced, he did his own research, asked Ajay Kanchan, the director, to do research. And that research part was done by them. I had no involvement there. And I think they did a remarkable job in that.
But
now, the L-tryptophan controversy that you talk about is basically their research. But what I remember so far is L-tryptophan, of course, we know is an amino acid, but was genetically modified, and that was sold as whatever name you call it. But 37 people, roughly, if I remember vaguely, had died because of it, and hundreds of people were affected. Now, that's what Mahesh Bhatt is, if he is quoting those studies, he's quoting from that particular aspect. Now, this particular thing was genetically modified. It was, of course, a very serious issue, and that was the first, I would say, a kind of a disaster that took place. Subsequently, we have seen over the years that, these, as far as these drugs are concerned, we've not gone into it. But when I say we have looked into the mass consumption thing, which is food, that is where the concerns arise, which Mahesh Bhatt did brilliantly to raise those issues in that documentary. The documentary was screened in front of Monsanto also, let me make it very clear. And the documentary was also screened in Parliament. Now, that documentary is one documentary which I think has been able to be a very important tool in the hands of activists who were trying to really raise concern over the BT brinjal.
No, exactly. In fact, I want to come to that because the next question concerns, because the documentary of Mahesh Bhatt, and which you linked to as well, was talking about the BT brinjal. Now, BT brinjal has had a very tortuous history in America, in India rather, because it's been developed by an Indian company in association with Monsanto, Mahako Seed Corporation. And Jairam Ramesh in 2009, I think it was, that he said we need more political, so long as we don't have a political and a scientific consensus, we should not release BT brinjal. Now, BT brinjal, for example, is like BT cotton, except that it is to be consumed. And the BT gene is actually Cry1AC gene, which has been incorporated into the brinjal, the fruit. Now, the whole point is that you referred to, in your opposition to BT brinjal, you actually referred to Professor Schubert, what he says, which is that the BT toxin in GM crops is 1,000 times more concentrated than in BT sprays. And in fact, this part of this quote of Professor Schubert was taken by the Greenpeace when they approached the Supreme Court, and in their petition against BT brinjal, they've quoted this. But strangely, what they've not quoted, and what you also have not quoted, is that the Greenpeace internal research actually belies these claims, because what they found in 2002 and then again in 2006 was that the BT corn in Germany and Spain, the plants are actually producing much less BT toxin than BT sprays itself. Now, it's when the Greenpeace actually talk about in their suit against the Greenpeace is talking about in the court case. It's an amazing U-turn what they've done. So initially, what they were saying is that it should not be allowed because there is too much toxin produced, and what they're now saying is that look at Spain, look at Germany. BT should not be allowed because there is too less BT toxin produced, so it is ineffective.
Well, again, I would say
so
that this particular case of the case, this particular case of the court case that you referred to about Greenpeace is not in my immediate understanding. But all I can say is one thing, that when we see these technologies, when we talking about BT brinjal, for instance, primarily what you are talking about, is that you must bring in this kind of a technology into India, and there was so much of hangama saying that the crop is getting affected by the kind of insects that feed on it and so on, which you referred to earlier. Now, my question to you, Anand, is again one. In the last 10 years, this was the moratorium came in 2010. Right. Let me tell you, after we have 6 years now. In these 6 years, did you hear of any problem in in brinjal? The point is, these scientific bodies try to give an impression as if the farmers are dying because of the BT brinjal thing, because of brinjal getting affected by this particular insect. The farmers are suffering because they are not getting the right price for the brinjal crop. That's the bigger issue in this country. Whereas we are trying to divert attention to a issue which is non-existent, or which can be taken care of, as I said, of alternate or natural means. That's the point we were trying to impress in our in Mahesh Bhatt's documentary, as well as in our campaigns also.
No, in fact, William's statement, just to add to that what you're saying, it's a very important point you're making. is that in 1999, the lawsuit, the Greenpeace again, they said BT crops are dangerous because the toxins are not readily degraded in the environment. And this is a point that many people have, Vandana Shiva has made, I think you've also probably made, that the degradation of the BT toxin is an issue for that. But in 2006 petition to block the BT crops in New Zealand, Greenpeace says that BT cotton is ineffective because the BT protein is degraded and linked to heat stress. So yet again, I mean, in first instance, what they're saying is that there is too much production of BT toxin, so it's harmful. Then they find out themselves there is too less production, so what they're saying, well, it's useless. Now, in the second case, they say that it is not degraded very well in the environment, so it's harmful. And then they say, well, it's degraded too fast, so the GM food is useless because it doesn't have. So you see what I'm trying to say? I mean, you make an argument, and then the scientists themselves, they discover that, look, this argument is not valid anymore, but then you use that and come back to it. And let me, I would like your opinion on the point that India, of course, you have a moratorium on the GM brinjal, but Bangladesh, there isn't. They have started, in fact, 2015, they're having fields of BT brinjal. So would you say Bangladesh has acted erroneously, or is it that India has taken the wise decision? I would like your comments on that.
Let me first take you to your earlier question. This part that, many times what you say is that they kind of, even in arguing in court, this is what happens. But I can give you a number of examples where the multinational companies have tried to really hide the facts, which they were actually, the courts made them come out with those facts, and then it was found that what the activists were saying were true. So this is not only the case where you are trying to find fault with Greenpeace. The point I'm trying to make is multinational companies are also responsible for doing it. They have been burying data. They have been trying to penalize people who have been questioning this. The Arpad Pusztai case is very well known. He was not an activist. He was a scientist who stumbled upon this outcome that, when the rats develop ulcers when you eat GM potato, and look at the hue and cry. I happened to be at that time in England, and I know no scientist had the courage to stand up and accept that result. Why? Then you find everything faulty with the research. Look at the monarch butterfly case in America. The monarch butterfly case, now then the scientists said that the methodology was not correct. Very interesting. Thank God it was not done in India. India, they would have said you don't even know how to do science. In America, they said the methodology was not correct. Anytime you question the science or the technology, every time there's something wrong with the methodology. But every time you find the technology wonderful, then nobody questions the methodology. Now the point I'm trying to make is, sir, if you've seen a report which the Coalition for GM-Free India has published, it has published a document carrying 400 scientific studies questioning the technology. Now, the point I want to understand is, why is the scientific body not taking notice of it, including the Nobel laureates? They say everything is fine. Your own scientific research is showing or asking questions. Why shouldn't you first try to answer those questions, is what we are trying to say. We are not against science per se, but we are saying, we cannot cover up or provide a cover up to the negatives that are quite visible and done by those scientists themselves. That's the question that we are trying to raise. There have been a number of cases of peas, for instance, going wrong in Australia or in Austria and so on and so forth, which are evident evidences before us that this is how the technology can fail. Now, the point is, in the case of brinjal now, I come to a second point.
Yes. About Bangladesh.
We were able to stall it. Now, that is what we were discussing earlier. If you remember your first question, when I questioned the way scientists were trying to propagate technology, is that's the point I'm trying to make. They are subservient to the private interest. Now, in India, we think we don't know what is the kind of a public interest that is being scuttled by the private companies. We all know that. Now, similarly, in Bangladesh, perhaps the civil society was not as vociferous in stopping the unwanted use of BT brinjal in Bangladesh. In Philippines also this is happening. Philippines, of course, the courts have struck it down. In Bangladesh, people were not as powerful, people were not as aware as in India. Now, in India, we were very aware. We did a lot of time, we spent a lot of time with people to get them understand this.
Professor, I'm sorry, we're really running out of time, so I'll probably have just a couple of minutes to answer. It's been very illuminating to talk. So let me come back to the glyphosate issue, which is what you talked about, and you mentioned, Professor, the group Seralini. Now, in fact, it's strange that you've written about Seralini group as well. In fact, you do not, or neither Greenpeace mentioned that Greenpeace has actually funded the group previously, and the claim of the Seralini group that GM maize causes hepatotoxic effects, they were investigated by the European Food and Safety Authority, found to be false. in 2012, the same group published a paper titled Long-Term Toxicity of a Roundup Herbicide and Roundup Tolerant Genetically Modified Maize. Again, 2 years and tens of peers' complaint later, the journal took the unprecedented step of retracting the study. This is what you were talking about. Okay, what it said, the journal said, was a more in-depth look at raw data is necessary. It revealed no definitive conclusions with the small sample size regarding the role of either NK603 or glyphosate in regards to overall mortality or tumor incidence. Now again, the same Seralini group reported that GM maize varieties induce a state of hepatorenal toxicity. Yet again, the European Food and Safety Organization was forced to reconvene and look into the matter. It concluded, and I quote, the author's claims regarding new side effects indicating kidney and liver toxicity are not supported by the data provided in the paper. The experts were of the unequivocal view that there were no indications of adverse effects of human, animal, and health environment. And this goes on and on. For example, there has been Dr. Jayasumina from Sri Lanka who's talked about that glyphosate use actually causes kidney effects, and people have shown the paper in Science and Nature, they have shown that this is actually not true. The reason is actually heat and the conversion of glucose to fructose and fructokinase. So what I'm trying to say is that, do you not see the overwhelming evidence that is brought about by an intrinsic ability in science to self-correct? I mean, it is not that scientists would take a result at face value, which is what you were mentioning initially, that it is not for anyone, let alone scientists, to take any result at a face value. But when you have peer-reviewed acceptance of a result, do you not think that lends credibility to?
It's very interesting. That's where I think it's very fundamental to the kind of discussion.
Sorry, it's a genuine question that I'm asking.
I'm not questioning your question. Basically, all I'm trying to explain is, let's be very clear. You have used many technical terms, which I think I don't have to answer them, because what you are trying to say is that these were the kinds of questions that were addressed by these particular studies. Now, the question here is one, sir, that all those studies, including Seralini studies, it was also peer reviewed. Now, one peer review is bad, one peer review is good. So we should also question the way peer reviews are done. Peer-reviewed study published in a journal. The journal, then it was refuted, it was retracted because there was Monsanto man joining it. You did not mention this. The other part is, when the same study goes into another journal, it is accepted. Then he was taken to court also. This man, Seralini, was taken to court. Court has also absolved him now of all those things. Now, hold on.
The World Health Organization,
hold on, let me.
Medical Association,
no, World Health Organization.
Of Sciences,
yes, that's what we are.
The Association of the Advancement of Science have all declared there is no, and I quote, there is no good evidence GMOs are unsafe.
That's what the question is, sir, that in all these bodies, that's what I've been saying, challenging from very beginning, are so under the influence of these private interests that
World Health Organization?
Yes, also. No, World Health Organization is a very classical case. It took them so many years to realize that cigarette smoking is harmful. How many decades it took them to realize? And now we know there is a study done that sugar is harmful. They haven't yet released that study. Can we ask WHO why they haven't done that? This is a study, monumental study done, which says sugar is harmful. They haven't released that study because they know it's sugar industrial interest will be hit by that. So let's not go by what these international bodies do. The point I'm trying to make is, if science is so good, then why are they always questioning when people like Arpit Pushjai ask a question, when people like, you talked about the glyphosate example in Argentina, there have been massive implications on the kidney, on the human health aspects. There are a number of studies which say that, but we try to just brush them aside, bring one national body to say that this is all okay. The point I'm trying to make, sir, today, let me be very clear, last, if you're saying the time is short, sure. I must make it very clear that organic food is now a booming craze in America. Today, companies are now paying farmers in advance, also paying in transition fees so that they can produce organic food. People are realizing that all the genetically modified food, all the chemically modified produce has been harmful for their health, harmful for the environment. I think people are more sensible, and I think the scientists also need to look into why people are now beginning to question and stand up. I think that's a more important question, and I think we cannot decry scientific studies which question the science, the dominant science to say per se. That's the question I'm trying to raise.
Just the last couple of issues. One, I would, I'm sorry, because of the time, I haven't talked about your 10-point program, so I'll briefly touch upon that. But before that, I want to come to the golden rice, which the Nobel laureates, the 100, in the letter they mentioned. And Vandana Shiva has been a vociferous opponent of golden rice, and so have you been. In fact, I have written disclosure. I have written a piece on the golden rice and Dr. Vandana Shiva's opposition to it. In fact, she gets all the figures wrong, but that is immaterial. But on the major point is that what they're doing is that you have 3 beta carotene biosynthesis genes. They've put it in the rice, and beta carotene, as you know, is a precursor to vitamin A. Now, the World Health Organization says 250 million people suffer from vitamin A deficiency, including 40% of children under 5 in the developing world. VAD itself is the leading cause of childhood blindness globally, affecting 250,000 to 500 children each year. Half die within 12 months of losing their eyesight. Nobel laureate Richard Roberts, who discovered introns, which is a fundamental concept in the dogma of life, he says GM food is essential to address malnourishment issue. We could do wonders to our food supply with GMOs. If you don't want to eat GMOs, then don't. But don't pretend they are dangerous. They are not. They are probably safer than traditional foods. And he's claimed more than 15 million children had died or suffered globally due to vitamin A deficiencies. So what is your opposition?
This is sheer propaganda. Let me tell you.
The discoverer of introns,
this is sheer propaganda. Let me tell you why. I have also been debating with the gentleman who bred the variety golden rice, okay? And I know what he's trying to say. The point is very clear, sir. The genetically modified rice or the golden rice has not been opposed or not been actually stopped because of any activist so far, opposition so far. It is still not past the regulatory test mechanism. You know, a Professor Glenn Stone of Washington University has done an ample peer-reviewed study who has shown clearly that it is still to pass the regulatory stages. So let's not get into that. The other part that, you know, as if, you know, great loss is being done. Somebody said, you know, I have been part of committees where they say, you know, look at Africa. The people are, I remember a picture they showed me, a child carrying a bowl saying, I need GM. On the other hand, he carried a placard saying, I need GM food because he was hungry. My argument to that was, you could have given him another pot or a bottle saying, I'm also thirsty, and shown a Coca-Cola bottle with that. That's not the way. I think this is what these scientists are trying to do, kind of create in a picture as if, you know, the people who are opposing these technologies are the ones who are responsible for hunger. Let me tell you, today we don't need this technology to address hunger. What we need to address hunger, as I said earlier in the very beginning of this discussion we have, is we need to address this issue of access and distribution. We produce food for already double the population. If these people were being fed the kind of food they need, there would have been no deficiency of vitamin A in this population. So that is where we need to attack, not on providing these kinds of scientific quick fix as the answer.
So, Professor, just the final minute and final question, if I may. You know, this is linked to your plan for the Indian agriculture, and I'll harp on that. But before that, briefly, you talked about you're a good proponent of organic farming. Now, it has been shown, scientifically shown, in fact, there's a paper in Nature that organic farming provides up to 34% lower yields than conventional farming, and you would require an additional 3 billion hectares of land if you want to feed the world through organic farming.
You know, it's very interesting. We quote studies which are suitable to our interest. Let me tell you, there is a study done by 400 scientists across the globe. It was sponsored by World Bank and United Nations. It is called IAASTD, International Assessment for Agriculture, Sustainable Technology and Development, something like that, IAASTD. It has shown very conclusively that business as usual is not the way forward. We have to move to non-chemical agriculture, and there are ample examples all over the world where it has been shown that there is no drop in the yield. Now, please tell me which is right, which is wrong. Now, here is a scientific body which is backed by World Bank and the United Nations, which has established this. So please,
Professor, let's not of a paper in Nature.
No, so paper in Nature. Why can't you question that? I have questioned papers in Science also. The Science Journal also have been publishing, many reports which are just benefiting the industry. They haven't taken the arguments. I have tried to respond to them. They don't take it. So the point is, this is very easily done. Now I'm saying is this is a UN and the World Bank sponsored study which is done by international team of scientists, 400 scientists. Now what do you want me to add on to it if the 400 scientists are wrong? That's the point I'm trying to make. So there is ample evidence. The second part is we have seen across the globe, even in India, that the damages that has been done to the environment from agriculture. Now your question is basically that the kind of agriculture that we need to do. Today 41% gas emissions are from agriculture, including livestock. Now, this is where we need to change agriculture. We don't need adapting technology. The entire effort today is to adapt farmers to adapt to the conditions that are going to emerge. But my argument is, why can't we change that model of agriculture, which is adding on to that crisis, which is releasing the greenhouse gases? We can do that. Why can't we do that? I'm sure if the Andhra Pradesh study has been evaluated in terms of how much greenhouse gas emissions it reduces, we'll have the data. So I think we need to have that kind of studies done to ensure that the future becomes sustainable. But let me at the end tell you one thing, that when I opposed the genetically modified crops at the first World Food and Farming Congress, where I was invited to speak in the very first inaugural session, I must share with you the industry backlash to me, just like the troll we have on the Twitter, was one of the scientists second day stood up and said that Devinder Sharma is part of Al-Qaeda. He was asked to step back.
Part of
Al-Qaeda, and he was asked to step back by the audience, somebody in the audience saying that this is not done. We invited him to come and talk to us, and if he doesn't gel with what we are saying, doesn't mean he becomes part of Al-Qaeda. So the industry can go to that extent also to see that people who question the dominant science are the ones who are bracketed in that category.
Right. Just final question, Professor, before we wind up. I'm sorry we've taken much more time than we should have. Here I come to your plan for Indian agriculture. And in fact, I don't have time to go into the 10 points that you make, but I'll probably just a couple of points that you say, that importing food is importing unemployment. And tied to that, what you say is providing a guaranteed, assured monthly income to farmer. Now, Professor, the 47% of Indians are employed in agriculture. It would be devastating economically to provide them an assured monthly income. Wouldn't insurance be better?
So should we let them die? The question that I think needs to be asked is, if roughly 50% of people are engaged in agriculture, so should we allow them to be dependent upon or pray to God that they should not be kept alive or whatever? The question here is, this is where I said the economics is faulty. This is what I'm trying to say.
My question was assured salary versus insurance.
I'm just coming to that. Yeah. Insurance is no answer. Let's be very clear. Insurance, if insurance is the answer for their salaries, why do we have to give 7th pay commission? Why don't we allow insurance to come and take care of their incomes? Very cleverly, we try to help one section of society with the kind of help we want to give them, and the other we ignore them and then give them all these kinds of sermons that insurance is going to take care of you. I think the only way forward, if you sabka saath, sabka vikas, is to provide farmers with a guaranteed income. All I'm saying is a chaprasi can get 18,000 rupees.
Economics, but Professor, have you calculated the economics of it? About having an assured salary for the farmers that you say?
You see, the fundamental question, let's be very clear about it. For the farmers, we think insurance is the way forward. For the government employees, why don't we suggest insurance as the way forward? We are willing to provide them ample kind of pay increases through the 7th pay commission. Nobody is saying that you should have the insurance taking care of their income. Secondly, if you look at the last 12 years, 48 lakh crore is the tax exemption given to the corporates. On top of it, we also know that stressed bank amount is roughly 20 lakh crore. Stressed, the one which has been which is under the cut zone is about 7 lakh crore, but 20 lakh crore is still there affected. And now the point I'm trying to make is, with 48 lakh crore, with another 20 lakh crore, which will perhaps be we have to take care of it. Why is it that we can't pay a fraction of it to the farmers? If that fraction had gone to the farmers, that's what I've been saying, we need a guaranteed income. The price policy has to be replaced by income policy now. Farmers too need income. Globally, it has been accepted that the era of price policy is over. We should replace it with providing farmers a direct income support, and that is the way forward. We can't just push them into sea just because we feel that the corporate sector or the industrial sector would be hit because the raw material cost will go up or the cheaper labor will become difficult. I think that's not the way forward. The way forward is to strengthen agriculture, provide them incomes, and that is what Prime Minister Modi perhaps needs to know, understand, sabka saath, sabka vikas.
Just final question, Professor. As you know, in fact, you mentioned it, that the world population in 2050 would be 9 billion people. The food production has to increase by a whopping 70% over the current levels. Do you think one can achieve that in 2050.
I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this statistics.
You don't agree with that assessment?
I don't agree. See, if you look at the report of the International Agriculture Assessment, IAASTD, it says very clearly the average calorie requirement today is about 2,600 or 2,400 calories. What the world produces today is 4,600 calories. There is no shortage of food in the world. As I said, the population today is about 7.2 billion. We produce food for 13.5 billion. We are being misled to believe that in 2050, we will be unable to feed the world. All that we need to do is to ensure that we reduce food wastages. 50% of it goes waste. And if we were to save that food wastage, we would have food left for even we would meet the requirement of food even in the next century, let me tell you. We have no such problem. This just being halla is being created by the industry because they have to sell their products. They have to sell this input provider industry who stands to gain. And that is what is actually linked to economic growth.
Thank you very much, Professor. It was an absolute pleasure having you on News Laundry. Thank you very much. That brings to a close our interview with Professor Devinder Sharma. Remember, when the corporations pay, the corporations are served. When the public pays, the public is served. Support News Laundry, support independent media. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed that, click up here to support us and down here to subscribe. Be sure to check out our older episodes and the other stuff we do, like Can You Take It, I Agree, panel discussions, comics and animations, and much, much more.